Welcome to Excel Business Math Series number 38. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel, then click on my college website link, and then you can download the workbook 135, Chapter 05. Hey, if you're in the class, just go to our Chapter 5 website. We're in Chapter 5, Payroll. So we're going to talk about lots of little details about payroll. Hey, we got to start out with gross pay. Here we have some employees and the hours they've worked. These are actual hours typed in, not times. First, we need to add up, and then we need to take into consideration their wage and calculate gross earnings. So let's go ahead and add this up. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut for auto sum, Alt equals, and I'm making sure it guesses right, and it is. Control Enter to put the formula in the cell and keep the cell highlighted. And then I'm going to double click and send it down. Click on the last one and hit F2. OK, that one looks like it got it right. It's adding up the 6 cells to my left. Now, over here, we are going to calculate the gross earnings. And that, of course, is going to be the total hours times the rate. Now, the only two things. One is notice there's nobody over 40 hours. We'll deal with that in just a moment. And second, we're multiplying decimals, and we're going to use our calculation to subsequent calculation, which is adding. And we're required to round because money, you got to require to round. So we're going to use our round function. I'm going to click in this cell right here, equals round. Round. We need a number. Oh, that's our multiplying total hours, and that's 2 cells to my left, times 1 cell to my left. Those are relative cell references. And comma, and it says number of digits. Hey, this is to the penny, so it's always going to be 2. 2 is to the penny. If we're going to the dollar, which is this position right here, it would be 0. If we were going to this position right here, tenths would be 1. And we're going to the hundredths, so it's 2, which for us is always penny. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and then double click and send it down. Now I'm going to click on the last one to make sure I got it right. Sure enough, I did. Now I'm going to click here and add. Alt equals is the keyboard shortcut for auto sum. It doesn't get it right, so I take my cursor and click and drag. Now let's scroll down here. We're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to do it in high speed motion, right? So I'm going to click here, Alt equals. It looks like it got it right. It does. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Now we need to calculate our gross. Don't forget the round equals round. 2 cells to my left times 1 cell to my left. Hey, does it matter? What if I did 1 cell to my left times 2 cells to my left? Of course, multiplication is commutative, so you can do it in any order. Comma 2, because we're rounding to the penny. Don't forget that. Close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Click on the last one, F2. Sure enough, it got it right. Alt equals. Now, that is what we're going to do in the textbook. They're always going to give us hours, and they could give us decimals. In fact, hey, we better check this out. Are we getting tricked here? I'm going to increase the decimals, Control 1. I'm going to go to the Number tab. I'm going to click Number, Show 2 decimals, and click OK. And it looks like we were not. We have no decimals or fractions there. Oh, there we have a fraction there. In fact, Control 1, if it had general, which it did, it would show us the decimal under the Number tab. But that kind of looks suspect there. I wanted to make sure, so I increased the decimals. I'll leave it like that. Now, this is not going to be in our textbook, and it's definitely not going to be on the test. But I got to just show you this so you have a reference later, and there's some other videos. Because a lot of times when you're doing accounting out there, you're going to be given time in and time out. And so we got to talk about this. Now, earlier in this class, we talked about what time is. Time is the proportion of one 24-hour day. So if I click here and Control 1 for Format Cells, Control 1, and go to General, you can see it gives me 0.384722. That's the proportion of one 24-hour day. If I go back to time, it gives me 914. General, it gives me that number right there. Let's go ahead and do that here. Notice this was 9 something a.m. and this is 3 p.m. This is later in a day. This is further through a 24-hour day. So this proportion or decimal should be greater. Control 1, general, and sure enough it is. It's 0.63. That is the whole trick, the idea behind how time calculation works. You're taking further through the 24-hour day, and you're going to subtract the earlier time, and it will give you the difference between the two. Now, that's the first trick. The second trick is if you subtract these two, it's going to give you a proportion of 1 24-hour day. So to get it back up to hours, you have to multiply it by 24. I'm going to Control Z. And I have videos here. This one goes very nice and slow through how time calculations work. And then these two deal with complicating factors when you have a night shift. All right, I'm going to click right here. Equals, and we got to know our order of operations since we need to subtract this time, take this time and subtract from it this, and then multiply. We have to use our parentheses. And then always, the rule is take the later time minus the earlier time. Close parentheses. So there's our subtraction, and then times 24. That is the formula for calculating time in, time out, and how many hours someone worked. I'm going to Control Enter and then double click and send it down. Let's do that again right here. Equals, open parentheses, always the later time minus the earlier time, close parentheses, times 24. In fact, let's not do that. Let's enter this in. What happened there? That is not what I wanted. Don't get tricked by formatting. That's just formatting. We should see a decimal here representing the proportion of 1 24-hour day. Control 1, general, and sure enough there I see 0.333333, or 1 divided by 3, is exactly 8 hours. 8 divided by 24 is 1/3, or 0.333 is a decimal. So now we can put this in edit mode, F2, multiply times 24. Now that 24 is a number hard-coded into a formula. But that's not a problem because it's never going to change. That's our rule. If the numbers change, put the number in a cell, use a cell reference. But that 24 is not going to change. Control Enter, and I'm going to double click and send it down. So those are the 2 days, hours that each employee has worked. Now to add them up, I simply come here, equals this plus this. That formula, because we don't have, we talked earlier in this class about using the sum function in ranges, but these are not next to each other. So we don't, this adding with a plus symbol is perfectly all right. Control Enter, double click here, double click and send it down. Now we can finally calculate our gross earnings, equals round. And I'm going to take our hourly wage times our total hours, comma 2, close parentheses. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Click in the last cell. I'm going to hit F2. Make sure I got it right there. I got it right. Now adding, Alt equals, highlight the range, and then hit Enter. All right, so those are gross earnings, but now we got to talk about overtime. We all love to work overtime, and we have 4 different methods for overtime. Let's go to our first sheet here. We have some employees, Sunday through Saturday, and their hours. We simply need to add up all the hours and then figure out which part of those all hours are regular and which part are overtime. So for example, if it's 42 here, we're going to have 40 in the regular column and 2 in the overtime. And then over here, we'll get busy calculating gross earnings. Now I'm going to highlight this right here. Actually, I'm just going to zoom in. All right, so all is easy. I'm going to Alt equals. It looks like the dancing ants are dancing around the right cells. Control Enter, and double click and send it down. Click in the last cell. Sure enough, they got it right. And I'm going to click escape. You know, if you double click here like this, sometimes you can wreck your formula. So if you double click, be sure to hit escape to get out of it. If you click in a cell and hit F2, the cursor's on at the very end of the formula, and it generally doesn't get you in trouble if you click somewhere. But I'm going to click escape anyway. Now, regular hours. Now, I'm going to scoot this over here so we can see a little bit better here. Now, regular, oops, not quite that big. Regular hours. Now, you can do this by hand. That means doing it by hand, right? 40, 39.5, 40. Why did I put a 40 right there? Why did I put a 40 there? Why did I put a 40 there? Because I asked the question, is this cell greater than 40? If it is, I want to put a 40 here. Why did I put 39.5 here? Oh, because it's less than, or it's not greater than 40. So I just put the whole amount. When I come here, I say, hey, is that greater than 40? No, the answer is false. It's not greater than 40. So I'm going to put 36.25. So I'm asking the question, is 43 greater than 40? Yes, that's true. So I put 40. Is 47 greater than 40? The answer is true, so I put a 40. Is 40 greater than 40? Well, it's not greater than. So what do I put there? Oh, I put whatever's there, which is 40. 49. Is 49 greater than 40? Yes, that is true, so I put 40. Is 38.75 greater than 40? The answer is false, so I put whatever is in this cell right here. Now, instead of doing this the long way like this, which if you do that on a test, that's OK. And this isn't a class where we really learn a lot about if. But in this situation, there's no other good method except for to use the if function. And that's why I went through it slowly like that. And I said, is this cell 1 to my left greater than 40? Is it greater than? If it is greater than, I want to put 40 here. If it's false, meaning that number is not greater than 40, then I want whatever's in this cell. For example, here, is 39.5 greater than 40? False. So I put whatever's in that cell there. So you can do it by hand, but here is the real good way to do it. One formula, copy it all the way down. Hey, we have an if situation here, right? Some test, logical test is this greater than 40? And we're going to either get true or false. Anytime you have a logical test, you either get true or false. In that case, you can use the if function, equals if. And what's great about the if function is the screen tip right here. It says, hey, give me a logical test. And our logical test is going to be, hey, is the all number greater than 40? That's the logical test. And guess what? A logical test only comes out to be either two things, true or false, right? And so the rest of this screen tip is polite. It says, hey, then tell me what you want me to put in this cell if that thing is true. And then also tell me what you want me to put in this cell if this logical test comes out to be false. So you ready? Is one cell to my left, and we use the greater than symbol. Now I have my 40 up here, right here, which we click on. And as we know from before, we hit our F4 key to lock it. That's the logical test. It'll work all the way down. And it's always going to say true or false. Right now, what would it say? Is that number greater than 40? True. When I copy the if function down here, what is it going to say? Is that greater than 40? It's going to say false. So now watch this. Right at the top, we have a true and a false. So watch. Comma, and the bold comes up in the next, the bold argument that we need to put in the function comes up next. Now, what do I want in the cell if it's true? Oh, I want to put 40. You could type in 40, but I'm going to go up and get it here. F4 to lock it. So that's what's going to get dumped in the cell every time this true-false test comes out true, comma. And then what do we want if in the cell if it's false? Every single time we ran into a false, right? That's not greater than 40. Not greater than 40. not greater than 40. We wanted the cell 1 to our left. So we type comma and then click on this one cell to my left. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and then double click and send it down. Pretty spectacular how that works. I'm going to click in the last cell and hit F2. We saw this one time so far in this class also when we did our checkbook register. We saw an if. So there's lots of examples where the if is just, once you get the hang of it, it's quite amazing what it can do. I'm going to click Escape. Now, overtime is easy. Once we calculate this whole column, we can always just say, hey, whatever this all is minus whatever the regular hours are. Because look, the way we did this right here, if we get down here, this minus this is going to be 0, and they have 0 overtime. And when you get to here, 51 minus 40 is going to be 11. So our formula is equals the all, 2 cells to my left, minus regular hours, 1 cell to my left. Control Enter, double click and send it down. All right, so now the key is we had to break apart these totals and calculate regular hours and overtime. Now, this assumes that the way the payroll contract is that for the whole week, if you work 9 hours in this one day, you're not paid necessarily for that extra 1 hour there. It's only the total where you start to get paid overtime. So if you're above 40 for the whole week. Later, we'll see how to do it slightly different for the day, because some contracts are written that way. All right, so now we have our numbers, regular and overtime. We can come over here, and we're going to do 2 gross earning formulas. And we have to use round, equals round. And we're going to say, oh, whatever our regular hours are, 1, 2, 3 cells to my left, times whatever the wage is, 1 cell to my left, comma 2, because we're rounding to the penny, close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Now, I don't have that formatted as a currency. Maybe we do that and Control 1. I'm going to say currency. Actually, by formatting those 2 things right there, when I double click and send it down, it'll format the whole column. But that's OK. All right, overtime equals round. And we just have one extra thing. Besides overtime hours times our wage, well, that wouldn't work for overtime because we have, in fact, I'm going to click Escape. We have to have an overtime multiple. Sometimes you're paid time and a half. Sometimes you're paid double time. Sometimes you're even paid triple time. I've never been paid triple time. Let's go look up here. Overtime rate. For this example here, you get paid 1.5. So if you make $10 an hour and you multiply 10 times 1.5, the new wage becomes 15 bucks. If you're paid double time and your wage is $10, then all of a sudden you get $20 per hour. So let's scroll over here. Overtime is going to be equals round. And I'm going to go get my overtime hours. That's 1, 2, 3 cells to my left. Times, and now I need to lock it. So whatever that overtime is, times this. And I'm going to hit my F4 key to lock it, because when we're going down, we need to use that 1.5 in every single one of these cells. Times, and I'm going to get the wage. Now, can I multiply in any order here? Could I have done overtime times whatever the wage is times the multiple up there? You bet. Multiplication is commutative. 1 times 2 times 3 is the same as 2 times 3 times 1. Comma 2, because we're going to the penny, close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. See, it works perfectly when you have no overtime earnings. That calculates to 0. Now, I'm going to click here. Alt equals. It guessed totally wrong, but I am not going to get tricked. I'm going to highlight these 2. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. So that's how to calculate overtime for the whole week if you work above 40 hours. Now notice we did 2 columns. We did whatever our regular hours were and overtime. We're going to look at a second method for the same thing. Calculating gross earnings for wages method 2 is going to be overtime for 40 hours worked in a week, except for we're going to use the overtime premium method. overtime premium method. That means we're just going to take the total, 47 for example, multiply it by the wage, and then we'll add an extra premium for the 7 extra hours that you worked. Now here's the problem. This week, and we have a formula here that'll tell us what to do. Total hours times regular rate equals straight time earnings. And then you add to it your overtime hours times overtime rate minus 1. So if overtime rate is 1.5, 1.5 minus 1 is 0.5. So it's like getting half of your wage for every extra hour. And then times the regular rate, that'll give us the overtime premium, and then you add them together. All right, this week Flora worked 40 hours and 17 overtime hours. Her hourly wage is $19.50, and the overtime rate for the company is 2. Using the overtime premium method, calculate Flora's gross earnings. Now, we're going to do this as a word problem. List all facts, state goal. What is the formula? Regular hours looks like 40. Overtime hours looks like 17. The wage, $19.50. Overtime rate, that's 2. We love it when we get 2 instead of time and a half. And what is our goal? We have to calculate Flora's gross earnings. There's our formula. Let's see if we can do this. Step 2, set up and solve using Excel features. Now, first, let's calculate this right here. Overtime rate, overtime premium rate. So we're simply going to say equals, oh yeah, whatever the 2 is, minus 1. Why the minus 1? Because the regular wage is the 1, right? If we get paid double time, the 1, it's 1 plus 1, right? So 1 is for your regular pay. The 1 added to the 1 to get to 2 is for like all that extra amount you make for each hour. So that's why we do whatever it is, minus 1. This is 2 minus 1, so we're going to get 1. So it's like getting a whole extra hourly wage every time you work an hour. If it was 1.5, it would be half, or 0.5. Total hours, we need to add those up. Watch this. I'm going to Alt equals. It totally guesses wrong, but I'm just going to redirect it. See, with this method, we're actually not breaking these two apart in the initial calculation. We're adding them. So we add those. Regular pay is going to be whatever 1950 times the total, even though she works 17 hours. So ready? Equals round 57 hours times the 1950. The whole thing, the whole shabam, all 57 hours times that regular rate. So comma 2, close parentheses. Now the overtime pay, that's going to be this number here, right? 1 times the 1950 times the 17. In essence, what the difference in method here is just showing you the extra chunk of dollars you got for the premium for your overtime. So you ready? Equals round. I'm going to say 1. That's all right there. Times the wage times the overtime hours. So right there, overtime hours times that overtime minus 1 times the regular rate. And that gives us the overtime premium. Comma 2, close parentheses. Now we add them up, Alt equals. Now, when you're doing this for the first time and you're used to the other method, you should go, wait a second, I better check this. So I'm going to check this. And the way I'm going to check it is I'm going to notice, this is what we did just in our last problem, right? 40 hours times 1950. And then what do? We add to it 17 hours times the 2 times the 1950. Now, we're going to do this all together in one formula. Equals round the 40 hours times our 1950. That's just the regular pay for a 40-hour week. Now, we add to it all of the extra pay for all of the extra hours. We're going to take that 17 times the overtime rate times our 1950. That multiplication can be done in any order. But that's it. We've added this little chunk and this little chunk right here. Comma 2, close parentheses. Remember this, we're checking. Ding, ding, ding. We got it right. All right, and so then we write in words, a little nice simple one. Flora's gross earnings are 1443. Now we have a third overtime. Calculate gross earnings for wages with method 3. Overtime for over 8 hours worked in a day. So the way you have to do this is you actually, in your time schedule, keeping track of an employee, we're keeping track of Joe. You have to say how many regular hours and how many overtime hours. So we'll add these up. Alt equals, hey, it got it right there. Control Enter, and then click and drag. I'm going to click down and drag. So there we have 6 hours. And it was just because there was 2 there and 4 there. So now, and notice the total is not above 40. So the way this contract is written is that in one day, if you work overtime, you get extra compensation. So here's our formula here, equals round, whatever the hours are for that, times our wage, comma 2, close parentheses. Enter. And then here it's equals round, whatever the hours are, times the wage, times the overtime rate. Oh, bummer, it's not 2. Comma 2, close parentheses. Enter. And then we alt equals to add them up. Isn't that alt equals amazing? You know, when you first saw it, you're probably like, oh, man, I don't want to memorize a keyboard shortcut. But notice in this class, this is kind of reflects the way it works in the business world. You're adding things, all columns and rows and numbers all the time. So it really is convenient. Now we want to talk about overtime terms. We have double time. We know what that is. Triple time. Man, I'd love to make triple time. That's when you make 3 times. So if you make $10 and you get paid triple time for an overtime hour, it would be 3 times 10, which is 30. Shift differentials. This is an additional amount given per hour given for working less than desirable hours. You might be given a shift differential if you're working the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Split shift premiums, often in restaurants. You work during the peak hours only. Example, 4 hours in the morning, off 4 hours at night. So some employees get paid an extra for this. Compensatory time. Instead of adding money, the employee is given time off from the regular work schedule. One last thing we need to do, salaried overtime. Usually you have a salary and then you just do the job and that's it. But occasionally in your contract, it'll say, here, you get this for the weekly, that's your salary. But in this contract, it says, oh, but you only have to work 40. If you work more than 40, we'll give you something extra. So the first trick is, here is, the contract says, this is what you're paid salary, but you only have to work 40. So it's easy to, from that, to get the hourly wage that's implied. So right here, we're going to say equals round, 875 divided by 40. The whole thing divided by 40 hours will give us our hourly wage. Why are we using the round? Because we're definitely using money. We're required to round. We're definitely doing division or multiplication on decimals. And we're going to use it in subsequent calculations. So I click there, divided by 40. Comma 2, close parentheses. Oh, 2188. Overtime pay. And we're going to click right here. It says here 5.75 hours overtime that we worked this week. So simply equals round. And remember, for overtime, we're always going to have 3 things: number of hours, the actual wage, and the overtime rate. In any order, you can do that. I'm going to take that one there. Times, scoot this out of the way. Ooh, I put an 8 times the number of hours overtime work times our rate, comma 2, close parentheses. And then finally, we can add that up. Alt equals, ooh, got it way wrong. The salary, and just a moment ago we did plus plus, but watch this. You can do it with the sum function. You can either type a comma, and it reminds you here that to get to the next value, type a comma, or you can hold your control key. But I'm going to do comma and then click right there. All right, when we come back in our next video, we'll move on. We'll look at a great incentive rates and equivalent earnings. See you next video.